Good morning and afternoon, depending on where you are in the country and or in the world. I'm Kevin Bemmel, and this is Trust and Estates Weekly, one of the Way to Wow shows. And our purpose here each Monday is to look at all things having to do with trusts and estates, how they work, how you can work with people involved with them in order to enhance your own business. So we're here at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern time every Monday for 30 minutes. And we're going to work together to figure out this whole sort of world of trusts and estates. It always sounds to me like, something that, some big landed mansion in the English countryside. It's not that at all. Everyone has an estate, or I should say everyone who owns anything has an estate, and how it's handled while they're alive and what happens when they die are all important questions for us as we navigate our careers and our own lives. So today I'm going to talk about how someone who's working with an estate gets started, and in particular, someone who manages an estate, how we get started. So I'm a professional fiduciary. When I first, take an estate in, or a trust for that matter, there's many things I need to know about it before I can take any actions. There's a whole information gathering and understanding process that we have to go through. And through looking at that process, what I'm hoping you'll see are ways for you to be involved so that you can develop this aspect of your practice. So let's go to the screen share. Here we go. And here we go. Slideshow, play from the start. Okay. So Trust and Estates Weekly, right? And, here I am over here in my notebook. Okay. So getting started, there's three functions, if you will, that are involved in getting started with any trust or estate. Okay. And those are documents, inventory, and accounting. Now, as you'll see in a few minutes, as we go into some of the categories, even if you're just involved in one part of dealing with the estate, one type of property perhaps, this is still the process that you're going to want to go through in order to make sure that you are properly handling the situation, whether you're working for the trustee, or whether you are the trustee or working for the trustee, whether you are one of the beneficiaries and want to make sure that your matters are being taken care of properly. These are the three fundamental getting started steps. Okay, so documents, inventory, and accounting. We're going to go through each one of them so you can understand them better. First of all, documents. Okay, this is a gathering stage. So once you've determined that you're going to manage the estate or manage the trust, while they're not the same thing, I'm going to be using those words sort of back and forth because it works pretty much the same way. Okay. And if you're interested in, well, what is the difference between a trust and an estate? If you'll go to our YouTube channel, look at, I think it's episode 1, I talk about those very basic issues, the difference between a trust and an estate, what a probate is, so you can start beginning to understand this whole world of business. All right, so the first set of documents that you're going to want to identify are agreements and contracts. Okay, so there could be none, at least none that are in writing, or there could be a huge number. So let's just say, for example, that you've got a trust And among the assets in the trust is an apartment building that is owned either by the trust or by the grantor, the person who put the trust together. Okay, so there's likely to be many agreements associated with that apartment building. First of all, there's hopefully rental agreements between the owner of the building and the tenants. Okay, hopefully they're in writing. These days, you will still find situations where people rent apartments on what amounts to a verbal agreement, but most, even small landlords, use written agreements these days. There's standardized ones that they use. Others have their own drafted up by their lawyers, or they do it themselves. But in any event, that's step number one. Get a hold of those rental agreements. Now, there may be other agreements. There may be a property management company who's handling the day-to-day management of the property. If so, you need a copy of that agreement. Now, the owner of the property may not have it anymore, may not know where it is. They may know that there's a management company, or in a case where you're taking over because the owner is incapacitated in some way, and so they're not able to guide you in this. A drive by the building, you might see a sign listing what the management company is. So call them up and explain to them the situation. You're taking over managing the estate, and you see that their sign is on the building, and are they still actively managing the property? And the reason you want to ask that question is sometimes they will have been fired or let go for various reasons, or they may have stopped handling it for various reasons and just not taken their sign down. Okay, that does happen. But in any event, they're probably going to want to see some kind of credentials on your part, so that you can, they verify that you are indeed, the person managing the estate now, and then they can give you a copy of that agreement. So you may have to get it from the other party sometimes. Okay, agreements and contracts are really the same thing. People use the terms interchangeably. There could be other contracts. There could be supply contracts. There could be so I'm trying to think of a different kind of property. Okay. Oh, so they may have a portfolio of financial financial assets, stocks, bonds, whatever, and maybe that's being managed by a wealth manager. Okay, so then there will be a contract between the wealth manager and the owner of those assets, and again, you'll want to get a copy of that contract. Okay, now you don't just want the copies, of course. You need to read them, and it can be very enlightening reading contracts. Okay, oftentimes even the owner does not fully understand everything that's in that contract. Okay, a lot of times they'll have chosen an advisor, and because they know the person, it's a friend of theirs, or they've been in business with the person for a long time. Okay, and there are clauses in that contract that can have a significant impact on how their affairs can be handled, and they don't even know it. Okay, so get copies of all agreements and contracts that you possibly can, either from the owner or from the other party, if you're aware that some kind of agreement exists, or you think there might be some kind of agreement. So it's worth your contacting anyone who has a significant hand in handling the trust's assets, to call them up and ask them, do you have an agreement with the owner? Or is the agreement with the owner? Is the agreement with the trust? Okay, so the person might have set up the trust, and perhaps they transferred the property into the trust, but then there was someone managing that property, and from that manager's point of view, their agreement never got updated to reflect that they're now managing the asset on behalf of the trust, not the grantor. Okay, so things, people don't always keep things up to date, and so that all has to be examined to make sure that everything is properly, has been properly set up or has been revised along with changes. Okay, so that's one set of documents. The other is statements. Okay, so if there are securities, maybe there's some kind of brokerage account, so you're going to want statements on that account, and hopefully more than one. Okay, ideally you'll get all of them, although if the account is very, very old, you don't necessarily need 20 or 30 years, but minimally you're going to want the last year-end statement, so you can see what happened the whole prior year, and the statements since then on a monthly basis, if that's what they're issued, or sometimes they'll be issued bi-monthly. Okay, it depends on the type of property that you're dealing with. Okay, if it's a 529 account, I think my daughter has a 529 account. I think I only get statements on that every 2 months. Okay, whereas on a brokerage account, I get statements every month. Certainly on bank accounts, checking accounts and those kind of things, you'll get a statement once a month. Now, on something like what do you call them? Government bonds. Okay, so you're not ever going to get a statement on those. However, once they're registered on the website where ownership of government securities like that are registered, so then you can log on anytime and essentially download a statement. Same with retirement accounts. Okay, the owner may have set up to get online statements only. Okay, and they may not download them every month. They may just go online and check them whenever they want to check them. Okay, and so it may entail getting access online to those accounts, so that you can then go back and download statements that you need in order to see the history of the accounts. Okay, now ideally you'll be able to get at least year-end accounts for several years, so you can see what's happened in the account over a period of time. Okay, that would be ideal. But look, you'll get as much as you can. Now, for someone who has never set up their account access online and only has paper, okay, so they may have it sort of stashed away in a box. Okay, and you'll have to get the box and get everything organized, or they may have gotten their paper statements, read them, and thrown them away. Okay, so as you may know, just because they were getting paper statements doesn't mean that there's not an archive of online statements, PDFs, that can be accessed. Probably can. Okay, and what you'll need to do is set up an online access for them, and then you'll be able to access those account records, and then you in some cases at least could get the could get records online for the entire time the account has been in existence. Okay, again, that may not be necessary for you to do what you're doing, but it's nice to know that those records are there. All right, so documents is first thing. Next is an inventory. Now, there's basically sort of 2 levels of inventory that you're going to want to do. And one is an overall inventory of what property is out there. Okay, and these are the 4 categories that you're most likely to find. Okay, so first of all, real property, which is real estate, could be apartment buildings, could be office buildings, retail, specialty properties, a hotel. I mean, it depends how extensive their properties. It may be nothing more than a single family residence or a condominium. It may be nothing more than, by the way, the rental agreement for the property that they're living in, and they don't own any real estate, but they have maybe they have a lease on the place where they're living. Okay, so technically that lease is not real property, most likely, especially if it's a residential lease. It's a personal property interest in real property. But on the other hand, they may have some kind of long-term commercial lease on some property, and there may be value in that commercial lease, And so you're going to want to, again, cast your net as broadly as possible. So, okay, so that's real property. Next is personal property. And personal property, I mean, it runs the full gamut. It could be anything from furnishings, dishes, jewelry, collections, cars, artwork, any kind of property that's movable, that's personal property. Now, I mean, do you need to do an inventory of, their clothing? Probably not. Okay. It depends. Now, if they have some valuable clothing, for example, do they have any furs? I don't mean faux furs. I mean, actual like a mink coat or a chinchilla stole or something like that. Anything where there's any kind of significant value, you're going to want to inventory it. Okay, if they may have, stainless steel flatware that they use every day, you may not need to inventory that. But if they have silverware, actual silverware made from silver, sterling or silver plate, okay, there may be significant value in that. And so then you may need to inventory it. Okay. Again, artwork, collections. Do they have stamp collection, coin collection? Do they have a wine collection? By the way, the collections may not be on the premises. They may have a wine collection that's stored off-site in one of these. They're sort of wine like warehouses. They're special storage facilities, temperature controlled, where people store wine, especially if they're a collector and they're buying, cases of wine, that sort of thing. They may not have enough space in their home to store it or to properly store it, and so they store it off-site. So again, look around, look through receipts and that are they paying for, some kind of storage offsite? By the way, they may just have a storage room offsite where they're storing what turns out to be just, what appears to be a bunch of junk. Okay. Do not assume that there's nothing of value in the junk. Okay. I went through a house one time and in the basement, there was a huge stack of books. And when I say huge, it was about 8 feet by 6 feet and about 3.5 feet deep. Okay, just stacks and stacks of books. And the person I was with was like, "Oh, we can just have this all the way." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." And we started unstacking the books. And in the midst of the stack of books, we found a coin collection. Okay, and some valuable coins. Some of them were over 150 years old. Okay, so we can't take these things for granted and just make assumptions. When you're doing an inventory, you have to inventory all the items. Okay, so that's personal property. Then there may be financial assets, stocks, bonds, CDs, bank accounts, futures contracts, option contracts. Who knows? I mean, the full gamut. Now, there could be, by the way, I mentioned government bonds. Now, I had a situation where the person owned, a couple of $100,000 in government bonds. They still had the certificates. Okay, now if you buy a bond these days, you don't get a certificate anymore. Okay, it's all done online. Okay, so I had to go through a process of getting those bonds listed online to do anything with them. Okay, and it was just an envelope with I mean, they're really cool looking, by the way, if you've never seen a government bond. But so you won't necessarily find financial assets, in some kind of statement. Okay, you may. Okay, and that's a good place to look. But you might find shares of stock, in an envelope or in some kind of portfolio, meaning an actual, portfolio, like, those sort of brown folding folders with the, sort of rubber band like strap that goes in them. You could find shares of stock there that are old and that they've never been, sent to a brokerage where they are now recorded in an online account. Okay, so again, all the papers have to be gone through to make sure that nothing has been overlooked, nothing's been left behind. And by the way, just because you find a brokerage account and the person has set up online access and there's all kinds of assets there, that doesn't mean there aren't other assets that aren't in that account and that haven't been put online. I had a situation like that where the person had a large brokerage account, and yet still, when I went through his stuff, there were, paper certificates for other securities. Okay, so you still have to do that inventory. Okay, now the last thing is intangible property, and I was watching a presentation a while ago on being a professional fiduciary, and the person was saying, intangible property has no value, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, that is not true. With due respect to the person who said that, that is not true. In some cases, intangible property can be among the most valuable property that someone owns. Okay, so intangible property will be things like trademarks. Okay, so let me give you an example of what a trademark is. Okay, the Coca-Cola Company, a big chunk of the value of the Coca-Cola Company is in the trademark for Coca-Cola. Okay, and that trademark is intangible, meaning it has no physical form. Now you say, well, wait a minute, I see it on bottles and cans of Coke all the time. That's the use of the trademark. The trademark itself is intangible property, and it's worth billions upon billions of dollars. Okay, so anything like that can have tremendous value. Now, would the average person have, some kind of trademark that has a lot of value accrued in it? No, probably not. However, they may own patents on certain inventions, okay? Or they may own copyrights to books, okay? All of that intangible property may have value. So, for example, they may own publishing rights to some songs. Okay, again, that's intangible property. You can't touch it. You say, well, I can pick up the CD. Well, that's true, but the CD is not the publishing rights. The CD is someone probably licensed the publishing rights and made a CD. Okay, the publishing rights themselves are intangible, and they can be very, very valuable. If you follow news on this at all, you'll see that there have been several performers, kind of baby boomer performers who are now getting into their 70s and such, and they're selling their catalogs for, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars or more. So these music catalogs are enormously valuable. Okay, and in fact may be the most valuable asset that the person owns. It may be the most valuable asset in the estate or trust. Okay, and so you need to know about it. Now, how do you find out about these things? Well, you got to kind of be a bit of a detective. You're going to have to do some exploring, looking through records. What does the person do, or what did the person do professionally? How could they have possibly been tied to any kind of publishing rights? Could be that they wrote books. Maybe they invented things. Maybe their parents or some relative invented something, and when that person died, those patents or those copyrights hadn't expired, and so they became the owner of those copyrights or patents or publishing rights. Okay, and if that's the case, again, just because they weren't the creator, that doesn't mean that those assets no longer have value. They may. It depends on whether there's any term left to those rights. Okay, so make sure that you search out intangible property. Are you going to see it commonly? Probably not. Okay, probably not. But you will see it, and to overlook it would be a tremendous breach of fiduciary duty. Okay, let's move on because we're going to run out of time here. Okay, next you're going to do an accounting, which means you're going to figure out what is all this stuff worth. Okay. Now I talked about wills and the court process and executors and administrators. Okay. And you may need to do an accounting that's submitted to the court. It depends on what exactly is going on, why the trust was set up. Was what you're doing the result of someone having died? Is there a probate going on? Or is this really just you're taking over management of a trust? The person could, by the way, the person doesn't have to be incapacitated. They may just not want to do it anymore. And so they're going to bring you in to do it. And nonetheless, you're still going to want to do an accounting to get you started. And so that you've got a base set. Okay, here's all the assets I found. Here's what they're worth. Here's where they're at. You're going to want to do that summary because somebody may want to see that at some point. Okay. And you want to be able to show, hey, I did the startup process correctly. And here's what we started with. Okay. Here's the baseline. Okay. And then from there, then there's a way to determine whether you've handled things properly. Now, I don't fall into the trap saying, well, if there's no baseline, they can't figure out whether I've handled things properly or not. Well, I mean, you may think that, but if there's no basis for determining whether you've handled them properly or not, the presumption could be that you have not handled them properly. And then how are you going to prove that you did? And you say, well, aren't I innocent until proven guilty? Well, yes and no. When you have a fiduciary obligation, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have fulfilled that fiduciary obligation. If you cannot, you may be in very deep trouble, not just with respect to a licensing authority, but with respect to whomever you're accountable to, whether it's beneficiaries, whether it's, or whether it's the grantor on whose behalf you're handling things. It wouldn't matter. They can hold you responsible for the work that you've done. Oh, of course you don't, Siri. Okay, so you're going to want to do an accounting, and again, whether it's happening because there's a will, you're probating a will, or there's some other court process, you're an executor and administrator. In any of those situations, you're going to want to start out with a baseline accounting, and then you're going to need to be updating it periodically, probably monthly. Okay, probably monthly. All right. So that's how you get started. Now, I'm going to go back here just real quickly because I have just a couple more minutes. And note, if you're a real property professional, if you're a personal property professional, if you deal in financial assets, whether it's securities, whether it's insurance, you can see you potentially have a role in helping handle estates and trusts. Okay, because you can see all of the types of properties that an estate or trust could own. Okay, and if you're a specialist in any of these areas, then you could enhance your business by helping people who have estates and trusts, or working with other people who work with them. Okay, so, look, you may do something exotic. You may be an appraiser of intangible property. Maybe what you do is you value music publishing catalogs. Okay, well, there you go. There's an in you have on a potential new source of business.
Assistant, not a virtual person.
I know you're a virtual assistant. Gosh, I gotta tell you, Siri drives me crazy. If anybody knows how to turn off Siri, please let me know. I gotta get rid of her. So there are times periodically when property needs to be appraised. It could be to make sure that it's properly insured. It could be because an estate is facing some sort of tax liability. Could be a myriad of reasons. So you can see that there are lots of ways for you to potentially get involved with handling estates and trusts, depending on what your profession is. All right. So that's the show for today. And here's how to contact me. These will also be in the show notes for today's show after it posts on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much for watching. Just real quickly before we go, a reminder, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time is our Tuesday show, Business Lessons from the Military. That's a half-hour show, and right now we're talking about how you can use Marine Corps warfighting doctrine to better run and help your businesses expand. And then on Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time is People Making Money, and that's our show where we talk to people who have interesting careers that they enjoy, that they're doing well at, talk about how to find such a job, how to enhance your skills, and how to deal with finances and building wealth. That's an hour-long show. So I invite you to be with me 3 times a week. And if you're interested in any past shows, please go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Way to Wow show. And please do consider subscribing. That way you'll know every time a new show posts. So thank you very much for joining me today. Wishing you a fantastic rest of the day and looking forward to seeing you later this week and next week as well. Marie Darlin signing off. You are my bell. All the best, folks.